Hello everyone and welcome back to Destiny Tunes. It's Destiny here. So today's video is going to be all about single parents. So if that's something that you like, sit back, relax, grab a snack, grab a drink, because this is going to be a jam-packed video dealing with all things single parents. So let's go. When it comes to the world of animation, some of the most iconic cartoon characters are parents. These are the characters we see in some cases developing, sacrificing, and dealing with the most. Navigating parenthood is no easy task from what I hear, and for some cartoon parents, their situations are far from ordinary, making the journey of parenthood one that is particularly more bumpy compared to those of a traditional family. There is no doubt that there are a ton of amazing cartoon parents out there, but what about the single parents in animation who are trekking the journey of parenthood alone? Tackling the topic of single parents in animation has to be one of my favorites, not only because I was raised by a single parent, but I think that taking on parenthood alone is something that is extremely commendable, and I love expressing my admiration towards the many different characters and the many different ways that they themselves are handling parenthood, but also the many ways that they became single parents. And today we will be doing just that. We will be highlighting some of my favorite single parents in animation and the ways that they were put in their situation. From lost to man-made creations, let's take a dive into the world of animated single parents. Now this category had to be first because most single parents in animation earn their position due to losing their significant other to death. There are honestly so many characters that I could have added to this category, but I'm only going to go with a select few because some of the other characters fit within other categories that I'll be talking about throughout this video later, and there are also just too many single parent characters in general to mention all of them. So if there's somebody that I forgot about or didn't mention in this video, I do apologize in advance, and we do love all single parents out there, so if I forgot them, there's no ill intention behind it. I just couldn't fit everyone in this video. But anyway, being thrusted into the world of single parenting due to the loss of your significant other has to be a different level of pain. I say this because not only are these characters having to learn to navigate life with this tremendous loss, but they're also having to do this while raising a child or children at the same time. These are the moments that truly make or break a character, and although some of these characters might not all get it right in the beginning, we do end up witnessing them pick up the pieces of their life and head towards the right direction. So first up, we're going to be talking about the overbearing single parent. These are the kind of parents I tend to give a little more grace to, as they do tend to be a little more overbearing in the name of protecting their children from the same fate that their lovers faced. We have characters like King Triton from The Little Mermaid, Marlin from Finding Nemo, who we know for being very overprotective fathers. But when we consider the fact that the mothers of their children were both tragically killed, it makes it a little more understandable. When watching The Little Mermaid, King Triton can seem like the kind of father who wants to prevent his daughter from living her own life and keep her under his control. But we have to remember that the same world Ariel is so fascinated with is the same world that brought death to her mother. As a child, it's really easy to side with Ariel automatically in this situation, but as a 16-year-old, I'm also not expecting that Ariel would see her father's actions as anything more than him being a jerk who wants to reprimand her. For anyone who doesn't know, Ariel's mother was tragically killed when a pirate ship crashes into her as humans ambush the family of mermaids playing in a cove in order to steal their precious treasures, their goods, and things like that. Now, am I saying that King Triton being judgmental of humans is a good thing? Absolutely not, because an entire species shouldn't be generalized based off of one horrifyingly bad experience, but again, it's totally understandable of why he would want to keep his daughter away from humans. Now we see the internal conflict that King Triton is battling with trying his hardest to keep not only Ariel, but all of her sisters safe as well, all while reigning over an entire underwater kingdom. Now eventually over time, and although reluctantly, King Triton does start to let go of the reins a little bit to let Ariel make her own decisions on how she feels about humans and live her life the way she she feels best. At the end of the day, no parent is perfect, and although I don't completely agree with the way that King Triton parented his daughters, the insane amount of trauma that he had to face by the hands of humans does make it a little bit more understandable and makes me more considerate of his decisions. Now, the case with Marlin and Nemo is different, but also the same. After Marlin's significant other and children are attacked and eaten by a barracuda, Nemo is the lone survivor, thus being Marlin's most precious treasure. Though he survives though, Nemo does have some physical abnormalities, which I'm assuming comes from the attack, and honestly I feel like this is another reason why his father coddles him so much, which again, I understand. Now, Marlin is the definition of a helicopter parent, and unfortunately smothering his child is the very thing that causes him to lash out and leads him to get lost in the first place. These sorts of parents obviously have their child's best interest in mind, but while their heart is in the right place, their children only see a parent that is doing entirely way too much, and because of that, they try to push themselves away from their parent as much as possible. Though Finding Nemo is one of those movies I try my best to avoid, as I find most of the characters to be extremely annoying, I have to give major props to Marlin as a parent, because many parents talk about how they would go to the ends of the earth for their children, but we see Marlin actually doing this, and without hesitation, even with facing one dangerous situation after dangerous situation, all while having to do it with Dory. Now that's commendable. Much like The Little Mermaid, Finding Nemo was another case of me siding with the child until I grew up and realized that Marlin truly tried his best, and all he wanted to do was keep his baby boys safe. Who would have ever known that a little clownfish would be such a heartfelt representation of what parenthood is all about? The unconditional love, the sacrifice, and the willingness to learn and grow for your child. Marlin truly does deserve all of his flowers, because although he is the definition of a helicopter parent, he also fits the definition of a really, really good father. Fortunately, with King Triton and Marlin, they are able to meet their children in the middle, granting them freedom to experience a life without their father's fear lingering over them, while the fathers also grant themselves a bit of freedom as well, letting go of some of that fear that has been holding not only them, but also their children down by these emotional chains. So along with the parents that tend to be a little overbearing due to the loss of their significant others, we also have the parents that seem to try their best to connect their children to the parent that they have lost. All of these characters fit within this category because all of their significant others passed away while their children were extremely young, meaning that their children don't remember a life with their mother or father, leaving their living parent feeling the need to bridge that gap. Hannah from Wolf Children and Greg Universe from Steven Universe fit perfectly within this category because while having to deal with the loss of their significant others, they also have to figure out the balance between teaching their children to be human while also teaching them how to be an entirely different species at the same time. I love the topic of single parents in animation because it gives me the opportunity to express my love for Hannah as a character, because when it comes to single parents in animation, she definitely deserves a medal. When her significant other passes away while trying to hunt for food after the birth of his son, it's up to Hannah to not only handle this unexpected death, but to also navigate raising two young children who are also half wolf. Throughout Wolf Children, we see Hannah face what feels like endless struggles as she tries to keep the children connected to their roots in her best attempts to offer them the opportunity to be human, wolf, or both if that's what they choose. In a world where raising her children to be human would be easier, Hannah chooses to devote her entire life to giving her children the freedom of identity. From moving away from everything she knows, to trying her best to understand her children's heritage, to ultimately supporting the children's very different paths in life, Hannah made sure to let her kids know that she was with them every step of the way. As for Greg Universe, it can be a little tricky classifying him as a single parent, considering the fact that he had the crystal gems supporting him along the way. But there also was a bunch that Greg had to do on his own, and a lot of that was figuring out how exactly to care for a baby that was both human and part gem. I have to give major props to Greg because his situation, much like Hannah's, is very confusing. With Rose giving up her physical body in order to birth their son, Greg is left grieving the disappearance of his significant other, also while trying to understand her decisions and how all of it works. I know that there are a lot of Steven Universe fans out there that don't always see Greg as a good father, seeing as he never enrolled Steven into proper school or got him the proper help he needed while consistently being faced with traumatic situations. And listen, I totally and completely agree with these points, but I also feel that, in my own personal opinion, that Greg did a pretty good job of providing Steven with a decent balance between being human as well as allowing him to find his place within the gem universe. Now, the situation for Chas Finster isn't exactly on the level of Hannah or Greg, seeing as Chucky is a full-blown human, but in the sense that he tries to keep Chucky connected to his mother even after her death, qualifies him for this category as well. There have been multiple instances throughout the Rugrats series and even in movies that have focused on Chas sharing information about his late wife with his son in an attempt to fulfill Chucky's curiosity about who his mother was, while at the same time honoring who she was while she was still alive. When it comes to death in animated series, there is usually a single episode that is dedicated to it or to the person, and then it's never touched on again. But what I really liked about Rugrats and Chas Finster was the fact that they didn't make Chucky's mom's death a one and done situation. Like I mentioned with Hannah and Greg, it would be really easy for Chas to just move on and not take any time to connect his son with his mother, especially considering the fact that Chucky is so young, but instead we see him try his hardest to include Chucky in his grieving process, as well as creating a space for his wife in their life. Chas Finster is a character who is oftentimes seen as being fluky or incompetent, so it was really cool seeing the side of him that cares so deeply about his son's connection with his mother. So you might be looking at the title of this category and thinking to yourself, well, isn't every child man-made to some degree? And although that is true, we aren't talking about the birds and the bees, we are talking about parents that made their children using bolts, wood, and chemical X. These are the sort of single parents that put themselves in their positions purposefully, the kind of parents that had actual intentions behind their children and thoughtfully orchestrated their creation. In this category, I want to explore the reasonings of why these characters wanted to create their children specifically, instead of other ways like adoption. Were the intentions pure? Was it to fill a void or perhaps to use their children in some shape or form? I want to determine whether or not children that were created by hand are loved and cared for the same as children who were birthed by their parents or something like adopted. Is it difficult for these single parents to love their children that started off as a pile of wood or chemicals, or is a parent's love truly unconditional? After using her expertise in robotics to help aid in an intergalactic war, Nora Wakeman creates a line of robots, one of them being her daughter Jenny, aka XJ9. Now, I'm pretty sure the original intentions behind creating XJ9 were to create some sort of weapon to help defend Earth against any intergalactic threats, but from the very beginning of My Life as a Teenage Robot, it's very clear that Nora doesn't just see Jenny as a tool, but also as someone who she cares deeply for. There's no question that humans are capable of loving inanimate objects, and when we think about it, although she walks and talks like a human, Jenny is the result of very well-made artificial intelligence. So Nora developing a maternal bond with this robotic creation is sort of remarkable. Even though Ginny is a robot, Nora doesn't treat her any differently than a mother would their daughter. She protects Ginny, she supports Ginny, and most of all, she loves Ginny. Now, Geppetto and Professor Utonium are in a much different situation compared to that of Nora, because when they created their children, their intentions were strictly for them to be children and nothing more. There are people who assume that the professor created the Powerpuff Girls to be superheroes, but we all have to remember that the professor was originally trying to create the perfect little girl. Them becoming power-packed was purely an accident, a result of Chemical X. Now, the reasoning behind the professor creating the Powerpuff Girls is sort of a confusing topic that doesn't really seem to have a clear answer. There is a movie in which the reasoning is related to time travel. Honestly, it doesn't really hold up with the rest of the series, as well as fan theories that feel more like personal trauma dumping than they do a proper explanation. But when we take into consideration the fact that the professor is a brilliant scientist who dedicated his time to perfecting the recipe for a perfect little girl, I personally would assume that it's to fill some sort of void. The professor might have simply wanted a family. This assumption doesn't feel too off base when we think of the sort of parent the professor is to the Powerpuff Girls. Even with their superhuman abilities and being made of literal household ingredients, it never stopped the professor from treating them like normal little girls. I mean, just look at their room. Everything about the professor screams girl dad in the best way possible. Now, whether or not it truly was to fill a void, the professor created the children he thought would be the perfect addition to his world. And even though they were contaminated with Chemical X, the professor obviously still feels as if his daughters are perfect in every way. If I thought that it was difficult trying to figure out why the professor created the Powerpuff Girls, the reasoning behind Geppetto creating Pinocchio is even more confusing, especially when remembering that there are so many different versions of Pinocchio. But in this video, I will be talking specifically about Disney's version of Geppetto, where the creation of Pinocchio isn't derived from losing a child or as a way to make money, but instead is the solution for a very lonely woodworker. It's never stated in the movie, but we can assume that Geppetto is either in his late 50s to 60s, so the fact that he wanted to take on a parental role so late in his life, it's confusing, okay? And honestly, sort of selfish when you think about the bigger picture. The act of Geppetto wishing on a star to make his wooden puppet a real boy seems very heartfelt in the moment, I won't lie. But when you really think about it, creating life just because you're lonely doesn't seem as magical as this movie tries to make it. In fact, it feels like one of the not so great reasonings for bringing life into the world, but that's nor here or there, because from what we see in the film, it's very obvious that even while Pinocchio is still a puppet, that Geppetto loves him very much. We see this in the way that he nurtures Pinocchio, and even gets himself swallowed by an entire whale, like a whole whale he'd swallowed. And this happens while he is on an intensive search to find the missing puppet. Mind you, while all this is happening, Pinocchio is still a talking piece of wood, and Geppetto is searching oceans for him. The fact that he was willing to do this even before Pinocchio is turned into a human with flesh and blood screams amazing parent. There are so many reasons and circumstances in which children are brought into the world, but with these single parents that created their children with certain intentions, it's clear through their very close connections to them that they were most definitely everything that they were looking for. I think it's extremely admirable because when you have a child who is a robot, a puppet, a science experiment, I personally would think that forming a connection with them would be a little difficult, and trying to acclimate them to your world would be a little too much for parents that are as busy as they are. But as I stated before, these single parents have shown us that they truly wanted their children, despite any circumstances that they were in or that they would end up in because of these children. Okay, so now we're moving into adoption, and I'm sorry to say this, but this category will basically be a generalization of characters that fall within the category of either adopting or finding their children, because there are honestly way too many single parents in animation that became single parents this way. So yeah, I can't include everyone. It's gonna be a generalization. I'm sorry. I know that I've been calling everyone admirable and all that jazz, but there is something truly special about a person who will take on the responsibility of being a parent when they truly don't have to be. And I'm not talking about walking out on your family or taking the time to Build-A-Bear your child, but I mean when you are down and out and you still decide to find space within your already hurting heart to take in a child in need or to open your life up when you yourself had absolutely no intentions of being a parent and still deciding to love that child either way. Yeah, I feel like something like that deserves the most highest of praise. Now, specifically, my favorite trope from this category are the parents who have absolutely no child experience but still decide to be a parent, and watching their parental journey is just like complete and utter chaos, but it's always the funniest and most wholesome thing to watch. There are also the parents that lead a completely different life before finding or adopting their children, and then they suddenly make a 180 on the life they used to live, and we see them turning into a better version of themselves, and honestly, I love that for them. There are so many different ways that these characters fall into the role of a single parent, whether it be literally finding their children on a battlefield, in an abandoned treehouse, placed on their doorstep, finding them after they fall through a sewer grate, or taking on full custody after the tragic death of your parent. So I know I said that I wasn't going to talk about any characters specifically in this category, but I do want to give a little honorable mention to Nani from Lilo and Stitch, because I feel like there isn't a lot of representation in animation that I'm aware of anyway, that showcases older siblings stepping up and adopting their siblings. If you have seen any of the content revolving around Lilo and Stitch, like the movies or the animated series, then you know how difficult Nani has had it raising not only her sister, but also her alien pet. From the troubles with Child Protective Services, Lilo acting out in school, or having to put her dreams on hold, Nani has literally sacrificed so much just so that her sister doesn't end up in the system. And I know that that sounds harsh to say, because why would any sibling want to see their other siblings put into the horrible world that is the foster care system? But we also have to think about Nani in this situation, who was only 18 when she adopted her sister. Taking on such a huge responsibility while also trying to navigate the death of your parents is no easy feat, and by golly, Lilo did not make it any easier. From always working hard to provide for her family, to trying her best to keep her sister from being taken by social services, Nani deserves every medal, every trophy that there is, because this poor girl is already so burnt out and she hasn't even made it to 20 yet. Disney is very hit or miss when it comes to the ways that they decide to represent certain people, but they did a pretty good job of depicting the reality of a teenager who is trying to balance work, dating, managing a household, all the while learning to be a parent. I had to take a special moment in this video to make sure that Nani got her flowers, because we see you, we appreciate you, we feel for you, girl. Like, give my girl a break. Adoption has never been seen as something that is stigmatized or taboo or wrong or bad. If anything, adopting a child, whether they are a human or not, is something that is always highly praised in animation, and honestly, I'm really happy about that. Anytime I get to talk about single parents I dislike is a great day for me. Now, the thing about animated movies and series is that they don't like for bad parents to stay bad parents for very long. So fortunately for the children of these parents, they do eventually get their act together, but I'm still going to call them out for being some of the most annoying and sometimes just flat out bad parents. So I'm starting off this list with my least favorite single parent of all time, Buck Cluck from Chicken Little. Now imagine having the entire town belittling and ridiculing you for speaking the truth. and one of those townspeople just so happens to be your dad. Listen, we don't know anything about Chicken Little's mother besides the fact that her name is Chloe and that she passed away, of course. Now, unfortunately for Chicken Little, he is left with a parent that seemingly couldn't care less about him. From not taking his son's side, being embarrassed by him, and essentially not wanting anything to do with him, Buck Cluck is basically not even a dad at this point. The fact that a big portion of this movie is just Chicken Little trying to find different ways to make his dad interested in him speaks a lot about Buck's role as a parent, and I'm not exactly sure if he became this way after losing his wife, but it's clear that he obviously doesn't know how to handle certain situations pertaining to his son. Now, I totally understand his character feeling lost after losing his significant other, because there are many characters mentioned in this video and not mentioned in this video that also struggled with the same thing, but when you are openly choosing to ignore and push your son away, that's when you enter unlikable territory. So if you've seen Chicken Little, then obviously you know that the relationship between Chicken Little and his father gets better by the end of the movie, but the fact that it takes the sky literally falling and an entire alien invasion for him to not only believe his son, but to actually take his side is actually insane. There is always something a little questionable about parents that don't have any sort of faith in their child, and Buck Cluck is a clear example of these questionable parents. Now, there may have been people who watched the movie and excused Buck's behavior because he and his son were able to reconcile by the end of the movie. Now, personally, I find his behavior throughout the movie to be unforgivable, even if his son was capable of doing it. It's already hard enough losing one parent, but having another that is actively trying to distance themselves from you has to be another level of heartbreak. And while we're on the topic of parents who try to distance themselves away from their children, let's talk about the Great Prince from Bambi 2. Now, although he was a jerk for majority of the movie, I will cut him a little slack because unlike Buck Cluck or Tim Lockwood, who were actively raising their children before their significant other died, the Great Prince had zero responsibility in raising Bambi, and he never really was supposed to. The Great Prince's role in the forest is to protect the herd, and although Bambi is his son, the responsibility of raising fawns is completely up to the does, and it's very obvious when watching this movie that neither Bambi or his dad even know each other, and with their only mutual connection being his dead mother, it could definitely make forming a relationship difficult. The Great Prince having to add being a single parent to his already long list of responsibilities is something we see him struggle with deeply, from distancing himself from his son to trying to send Bambi off to be raised by a stranger. The interactions between the Great Prince and Bambi can be difficult to watch at times. We see how desperately Bambi wants his father to want him in the same way he wants him, but I honestly think a lot of the disconnect between them comes from the fact that the Great Prince sees Bambi's mother in Bambi, and he just kind of sees it as a situation where he doesn't want to end up losing someone else. But at the same time, the Great Prince is just another version of Buck Cluck and Tim Lockwood in the sense that he doesn't really want anything to do with his son until he does something worthy of his attention. Because after Bambi impresses him by jumping a great distance, he invites his son into his life, and luckily for Bambi, this is where their relationship can finally start to flourish, but it's like, why did that have to happen in order for you to acknowledge your son's existence? Again, I will be a little more lenient on the Great Prince because none of this was ever supposed to be part of the plan. And when I say this, I don't mean his significant other dying, I mean parenthood in general. Having to carve out time to raise his son while trying to protect everyone else can seem like a massive task. But we see him balance this role with raising his son and teaching Bambi what the role of the Great Prince entails. And through all of this, it may seem as if the Great Prince is the one teaching Bambi, but at the same time, we see that Bambi is also teaching the Great Prince how to let go and enjoy life a little more. And it's through this balance that we see the relationship between Bambi and the Great Prince start to actually build and thrive and flourish. It's unfortunate for Bambi that it take so long for his father to finally see him, but I guess we have to be happy at the fact that these fathers finally actually did see their sons, even if they had to impress them to do it. Whether it's Buttcluck, Tim Lockwood, or The Great Prince, this category was meant to emphasize the single parents who neglected their children emotionally after experiencing the loss of their significant other. Now, we all know that over time these fathers eventually warm up to their children, but I wanted to highlight the sort of parents who seem cut off from their children while still trying to process all of the new changes. Maybe calling them bad single parents is going too far, but at least from my perspective, I could think of so many other ways that these parents could have gone about navigating loss and parenthood without having to leave their children out to dry. As we reach the end of this video, I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the topic of single parents is something that I've always been very interested in, seeing as I was raised by a single parent. I think that animated movies and series, including this sort of representation, is not only beneficial to parents who may be struggling to feel seen, but also for the children of single parents who want to see a family that looks like theirs represented by their favorite characters. Whether it's done in a realistic or unrealistic way, the fact that there are so many different forms of representation for single parents in animation is admirable. From adoption, loss, or making your children from scratch, being able to see the many different ways that these single parents were put in their position and then navigated that situation is pretty interesting and eye-opening. Throughout the world of animation, there are so many amazing forms of representations of parents and family units, and I just want to say that by no means in creating this video did I intend to make it seem as if single parents are better or more admirable in any way, but I do feel like it is important to give praise where you feel it's due. And I think that single parents are amazing. But then again, I think that all active and present and good parents are superheroes that deserve praise every single day because you are doing the true hard work. Raising a human being to be a good person cannot be easy, so hats off to you. We love parents. But with all that being said, this video has now made it to its end. If you liked it, let me know that you did by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and turning on notifications so you never miss a video in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments, who is your favorite single parent in animation and why? Okay, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. Bye.